For both of the VR guys, may I just ask what software you're using for your environments, like Unity or?
The question is for the VR guys, what software are you using for your environments?
We're using, SoundSoft is made in a custom engine called Ozone, which was made by my programmer. I don't know if he's going to open source it or not, but it's basically C++.
The team is made in Unity.
This is a question for Mr. Luo. Can I speak in Chinese? 那个罗先生，这不是一个问题，这是我代表所有的佛教修行者，向微软提出的一个建议。我刚才看到了您的那个眼镜然后让我想到我们佛教最高的教义，它就是法界，就是十法界，是大小互融，然后呢就是像在那个眼镜中所看到的，你可以随手把东西拿起来放到里，它这大和小是没有一个完全一个固定的限制的。那我在考虑，就是如果您能够用这种技术，把极乐世界的这个景象和我们现在的现实世界融合在一起，让我们这些净土的修行人，然后戴上眼镜，就是时时刻刻都处在一种修行的状态。那么保证以后我们临终的时候砍断能够往生见到阿弥陀佛。那么对那些密法的修行人的时候，他们就可以戴上这个眼镜，随时都看到坛城。然后这样子的话，我想，这样的产品对于我们这些修行人的话是会很有吸引力的。阿弥陀佛，这是一个建议。
补充一句，我们实际上，前段时间也在这个，和包括像龙泉寺，他们也去微软刚刚参观过，然后做过一些技术的交流。然后我们的同事也去龙泉寺给他们介绍过一些微软现在的这样一些技术。我觉得这方面，微软是非常开放的，我们愿意用我们的技术去，就刚才我说的最后一句话，enable each person and each organization on the planet.
It's great that we're acknowledged how advanced the technology are. I just have one question that I've experienced the emotional experience, which has been very strong, but not in virtual reality, but in my dream while I was sleeping. So I was wondering, in my dream, there was been unconsciousness that's been discovered. So I wondered, have you guys done any research about like psychology, if that's related with virtual reality, and actually help people to express themselves in a deep emotional experience, which is similar to the dream. And also the second thing is that I've heard a program software, it's called Dr. Shino. It's actually very effective rather than the C language, because it's so complicated that it takes years for a person to maturely manipulate the program. Actually, Dr. Shino can be functioned by even a 6-year-old kid as long as he knows how to function, and so it's be easier for people to program such technology as virtual reality.
So we do work with scientists. We work with behavioral scientists. I'm not a behavioral scientist or a psychologist myself, but as a layperson, I have a deep interest in the field. I'm also interested in dreams like yourself, and I've also had emotional experiences in dreams. I can tell you that from my contact with behavioral scientists, there's a huge interest in facilitating people's creative expression within the space. I feel that the best virtual reality experiences that are out there at the moment are actually those more creative apps. So if you're interested in trying something, Tilt Brush, which ships with the vibe, is, I can think of no other word but a magical experience in working with it.
Yeah, and that's probably something that we can set up to run on one of our systems tomorrow for you to play with. Answering your question from my perspective, I do a lot of lucid dreaming, learning how to recognize that you're in a dream, and that certainly has made me think about methods to recognize that we're all in a dream right now, in our created illusion of this world. And I think there's an interesting potential there, as alluded to by Owen, to have the system be smart enough to help you manipulate symbols in a way that is easy and straightforward and powerful, like as he was dealing with his shadow self creature. I think within the next 5 years or so, we're going to see something that one might describe as a shamanic interface built on top of this trance interface. And so these kinds of shadow self aspects, or these kinds of aspirational aspects, are things that we can take from outside of our mind and put it in the virtual world and manipulate it in ways that are psychologically meaningful to us.
I found I'm not a scientist, but I've shown sound self and watched people play it hundreds, maybe thousands of times, and been developing the project based on what I've observed. So it's kind of a blunt scientific process to it, and that's informed my design process. And what I've found, what's become kind of a cornerstone to the design of sound self has been abstraction and keeping things abstract. And when we use symbolic items, when we use objects that have a meaning, it compresses very effectively into atoms as opposed to bits. We know what the thing is, and it immediately becomes less evocative. Whereas when something is abstract, unfamiliar, and yet we still feel connected to it, because when we don't have a symbolic relationship with something, it's easy in many cases to get bored. But if we can keep someone's interest in something that is abstract, it can be very powerful for bypassing the intellectual compression of reality into objects and accessing the emotional realities underneath, and even the realities beneath our emotional realities. I had a person play sound self just about a week ago, and as he came out of it, he was super in touch with energetic motions of pain through his body, and how the pain in his shoulder connects to this pain in his right knee, connects to his pain in his hip, connects to this pain in his left knee, connects to this pain that starts in his left big toe. And he was able to settle into and feel how these imbalances form in his body, because he wasn't distracted by thoughts, by objects. And I think you could only get there by, at least through art, as far as I know. I think you can only get there through abstraction. That's my opinion.
Thank you very much. I have one very quick question for both Owen and Rob. It's the same question. And then also one question for Jason. And they're all very short questions. I was struck in both Owen and Rob, you mentioned a very similar thing, which is the response of the people who are using the things that you're designing. And it reminded me in the early 1960s of Eliza, right? And so I just wanted to find out from you guys how you see the difference between Eliza, which couldn't do anything and had no idea, right? Eliza was just y'all know what Eliza is?
Not really.
Maybe you guys can tell them what Eliza is so I can go on to the next question. Eliza's this program that made people think that it was like a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and it didn't know anything. It just was programmed in a certain way so it looked like it was responding and interacting. This is in the mid-1960s, like 62 to 64, I think. And people are coming out, like, after talking to Eliza for a very long time. Eliza understands nothing. And they're in tears, and they're deeply moved, they're sharing all these inner secrets and stuff like that. So because a big part of Buddhist practice is also realizing that there's no relation. There's just no relation. That's one question. And then I wanted to ask a question to Jason, because we've used Maslow's theory of needs quite often. Maslow's theory of needs comes out of the developmental modernization theory of the United States in the 1950s, and it's been debunked by people who are relating it to colonial anthropology and modernization theory, and I love the way that you reverse it. I wonder if you have any ideas about how we might just dump the whole thing. Thanks a lot.
So I'm completely open to the idea that the emotional reaction comes entirely through framing and expectations. That's 100% possible. And in fact, we've done some studies around that already. So in the lab, we showed people two different trailers. One that frames it as a playful experience, and one that frames it as a therapeutic experience. It'd be really cool if I could remember what the results of that study was, but I can't. Needless, so the scientists are investigating that in a meaningful way. from my point of view, it's meaningless. It's not to be dismissive of your question, but I also feel it's kind of a meaningless question. Like, efficacy is efficacy, and when I do my own personal practice, I purposely don't peek behind the mirror too much. Now, maybe that's not, I would not class my practice as Buddhist practice, maybe that would not be a good Buddhist practice, but I'm happy with the effectiveness of what I do rather than the mechanism of that effect.
I think what made Eliza work so well is it's a mirror. Eliza has no intelligence, but Eliza reflects your intelligence, and you see your intelligence. And I think something that makes really expansive game design is a system that doesn't need to be intelligent in itself or rich in itself, but reflects your richness. The system doesn't need to be sad, it reflects your sadness. The system doesn't need to be that powerful, it reflects your power. And the interesting question from a design perspective is not how do I make a powerful experience, but how do I reflect the power that the other person is bringing.
Yeah, people have taken a lot of cuts at that. And some folks who come up with alternate strategies or alternate approaches to say, oh, this is the hierarchy that needs to exist, and so they say there's no hierarchy whatsoever. But I think it's fair to say that it's a reasonable approximation of first world, industrialized, cultural stories, right? At first we have to get the job, and then we have to get married, and then we have to get the big house, and then we have to get the car, and then we have to get the big TV, and then we have to get the bigger house, and the bigger car, and the bigger TV. And eventually, if we load up with enough objects, then we can start thinking about things like, our neighbors, the planet, things like that. So it's really more of a lens to consider how we might think about that differently. And absolutely, outside of first world industrial cultures, other cultures, they put spirituality and family and connection at the center, and I think that's absolutely the right way to do it. Who's the problem in the world, though? It's going to be these industrial cultures. And so that's what I was kind of talking towards.
We have time for just a couple more questions. There was back up there. Starting over there, and then back to you. Yeah. You have to wait for the microphone.
This is fun, guys. Thanks.
Thank you for your great talk. I know there's been a lot of work going into research for into VR treatment for PTSD and depression and anxiety. So I was just wondering, how persistent are the effects of people who go through your VR, and also, how that carries to their real lives, and whether you see it more as like an opening.
I think rather than talk about, I'll talk about my own personal experience. So, I use Deep mostly for anxiety. And what it is an intervention. I feel that with my own depression and anxiety, the problem isn't so much the experiences themselves, but rather the process of those experiences, that I get kind of onto a depression track, and that depression self-perpetuates, or I get on an anxiety track, and that anxiety perpetuates. These feelings are kind of like viruses, and they try to create the conditions under which they can thrive within my life. And something like Deep, or weightlifting, or running, or going to a yoga practice acts as a kind of a pause button for that track. And then it's up to me to kind of redirect things. The yoga class or Deep doesn't redirect things for me, but it gives me a chance, it gives me the space, it gives me the time to go, okay, see what I'm doing here, let's do something else. So really, in terms of its intervention for depression and anxiety, that's the moment that I'm really interested in, that kind of rebalancing, giving a little distance from the feelings so that you yourself can then take over and go, okay, I want to go this way.
Okay, I think we have one more question up there. Thank you. And then we're going to yeah.
Hi. So I have a question about kind of like the cons of VR as it stands right now. I'm thinking kind of like what you have to say about like how VR can improve the way it is right now. I know that it's still kind of starting. For me, I think like specifically for spirituality, like one of the main detractors for me with it is, as someone who's interested in developing VR applications related to spirituality, is the democratic aspect of it, because it's so inaccessible. I mean, I think all of your apps are for the Oculus. I know. No.
Oculus 5.
Or for like fancy
For
machines.
the big ones.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know about the Google Cardboard now, and there's like the democratization of VR is like becoming more of a thing. So yeah, I'm wondering what work you think needs to be done so that these worlds can become more democratic and accessible to everyone, because I think that's pretty important. I know you can feel free to disagree with me. But...
Thank you so much. I'll take an initial stab at that. Absolutely, that's an important concern. I think, from a design perspective, and as you've been designing your apps, you'll have to consider the audience and the platforms and what are the features the platforms have, and then constrain your designs based on what those features are. Some of the stuff we're doing, as you see here, is exploring maybe the features that are available in certain platforms, and some of it's kind of cutting edge. So it will eventually, I would argue, become very, very common. So we have Moore's Law helping us out. Like we didn't used to have supercomputers in our pockets. These things will come down and become ubiquitous, as you saw in that VR, projection curve. But I think in one way, it's just going to solve itself. For the short term, I think there's some interesting things happening here in China, for example. VR arcades are a huge thing. That's not a big thing in the United States. People generally buy the VR system, put it up in their house. But out here it's arcades, and so lots of people go to a location and play with those things there. So I think that's a very democratic approach to that kind of access. That'll be my response.
I really want to see VR in libraries. I love libraries, and I think that is a big answer. I'm not sure if that's the way they work in other countries, but it might be like if they're free, you can go in, you can rent movies, you can get books. I think that's a really good space where you can make it accessible for free to the general community.
Okay, we have one final question right up here that they're trying to get in.
Your point about libraries. I'm a big fan of libraries as well. Yeah. And so my question was, you mentioned how creating VR environments will soon be hyper-simplified, just as Instagram and Snapchat and so forth. So when that content creation capabilities do come to fruition, that's a while, right? But what I like to ask always people like you guys is, what is your dream project? Obviously, you're already working on your dream projects, but what is your next dream project, right? Because obviously you guys have arrived at the cutting edge, so you have this visibility of the next possibilities, right? And so I'd like to just hear your thoughts about that.
I've been selected to go first, and my answer is probably going to be the most disappointing. Working in this space, for me personally, has been such an enveloping task to my attention, and the only thing I can see after Sound Self is a break. But yeah. But there's a very real answer to that. That the creative process is one that is like the breath. You breathe in and you breathe out. And you breathing in is paying attention to the world around, playing games, reading, meditating. Breathing out is creating and sharing. And so after spending so long breathing out, it's breathing in.
So my personal ambition is to become a good enough designer to be able to make a board game. That would be what I'd really like to do. But in terms of the space of virtual reality, I'm really interested in how much I've enjoyed helping make these environments and take part in making these environments. So doing something that allows people to be creative within virtual reality. The experience that I had of drawing and embracing the golem, that could be something that could be scaled up into an experience where people manifest their demons in front of them and then play with them.
Okay, thank you everybody, thank you panelists so very much.
Jason's answer as well.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll do one real quick. Yeah, I want to help you with that. I think I threw out that phrase, the shamanic interface, but I think that's one of the places where anthropological studies and this deep wisdom path can give us symbols that are meaningful, and so many of them we've talked about over the last couple of days, that we can translate into the virtual world and make them into powerful psychological tools.
I have one thing I want to add, that just to give you a peek into the conversations we've been having. what Owen and I have been talking about, what the conversations I've been having with people working in this space, they seem to, there's a few points that I keep noticing them coming back to. One of those is ritual and ceremony. What happens when you combine these technologies with which are already exploring going into the magical. What happens when we draw inspiration from ancient traditions of magic like ritual?